Hello and welcome to the Hobby Breakfast Show. You're joined today by myself, the Mayor, joined by Onod.
Hello.
And OT.
Hello.
And today we're going to be doing a Goblin Town before you buy. So we're going to be going through the army, how to collect it, what's good about it, what's bad about it, and some strategies and some lists. Okay, what will you need for the rules?
A book and another book.
Or you can get the online version.
Yes, tasty. I recommend getting the online version because
Because
you'll just have to carry your iPad around.
It's dead cheap as well. Like, you know, they're a bargain.
It's not that cheap.
No,
It's
no.
like
I was being
expensive.
deeply sarcastic.
Okay. Well, I think given the choice originally, it's nice having a book, but also I probably would have just bought all the ebooks if I was starting afresh. So anyway, rules manual and the Hobbit Army book, pretty much as minimal as you can get.
Book.
Tasty books.
Tasty books. Yeah, unfortunately you have to buy the Hobbit Army book. Boo.
Less good value than the Armies of Lord of the Rings because it's significantly thinner and worse.
And shitter.
It's pay to win, isn't it? So
It really is.
Well,
yeah.
I don't know if it. I don't think Hobbit armies are better. I think they're just better
but
statistically.
you have to pay for an army book to use them. So
No one
pay to win.
is falling for that bait. We move on to the overview.
So the play style, well, it's quite themey actually because you just have a shitload of goblins, and with the scribe, it really feels like an unending wave that's just going to crush you.
Their ease of collection, though, very easy. You buy goblin, you cut goblin off sprue, you place goblin on base.
You dip goblin in flesh-coloured shading.
You dip goblin in flesh-coloured shading.
Don't bother priming. Just dunk them.
If you're feeling extravagant, maybe pick out their weapon, and then you're done.
Pretty much. I haven't even painted the hair on mine.
Flesh.
It's just
Fresh.
flesh and bone, yep.
Flesh.
And the occasional loincloth.
No, you just paint
They're
them
very
fresh
easy to collect and paint.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of decision making with Goblin Town. It's not like you're, Gondor and you've got fucking 1,000 heroes and 1,000 different types of troops that you have to intermingle and balance out. You have one option, and that's to take your 3 unique heroes that together are quite inexpensive, and then just hoard out. That is the strategy with collecting anyway. So it's nice and easy.
Difficulty to play.
Easy to medium, which is what I've written.
Yes.
And
any fighting on those points?
You may actually have played more Goblin Town than any human being alive.
That's not true.
That's probably not true. I've had a lot of success with Goblin Town.
Top 10 in the UK, I reckon.
I mean, who do you think will have played it more?
There will be some players who have played it more for sure.
People would have been playing it consistently in tournaments since it came out.
I've probably played it. I would say I've probably played it in like the top 3 players this year anyway, because I've been to a lot of tournaments and Goblin Town seems to become my main. Not only that, but on Longshanks, which seems to be becoming the tournament app of choice, I'm currently the highest ranked Goblin Town player.
What a nerd.
So there we are.
You
I would say they're easy to medium.
The most hated man in Britain.
Yeah.
Also,
much.
you've revealed
Zero
your
friends.
identity because people can just
no.
go on Longshanks and find it.
It doesn't matter. I'm going to be appearing on Thingy later.
We have also announced that Mayor won a tournament, which announced the winner on Facebook. So it's not that hard if you really want to.
Yeah,
I want to track him down.
You want to stalk Mayor? You're capable of doing that, guys. It's an easy Google.
This is all getting cut. So,
this is why it's better when me and OT edit. We leave in the shit.
It's significantly lower quality.
that bit's getting left in.
The point.
Sweet spot. I think the point sweet spot is Eddie. I think it's still pretty fucking good.
No, it's not good at high points.
You've just got
really
so many troops though.
No, because you end up having to have like 4 ranks deep, and at that point, it's not efficient. It needs to be low to medium. If you get to high points level, it's not terrible, but it's like the matchups really start going downhill because you just can't surround. Goblin Town needs to gain momentum in the middle of the game to finish off the game, and if you can't get 3 or 4 on ones, and you're just fighting like a rank and file, you've essentially got 2 of your goblins versus, I don't know, 2 to 3 of them if they've got spears or pikes, but they're going to have banners, they're going to have higher fight value than you, so you can't just win a battle line attrition with goblins. You've got to surround and get lots and lots of goblins on, and that's really hard in high points levels. Also, you tend to get less value from things like the scribe, which can really proportionately buff out your numbers. And I think medium's probably the best for Goblin Town, in my opinion. It also performs well in most cases at low as well.
Because you just have so many numbers at like anything like 500-600, you'd probably be outnumbering your opponent like 2 to 1 or something. Like it's a bit bonkers.
For sure.
Bizarrely, they're quite cheap, aren't they, to actually buy?
Yeah,
army.
They are quite cheap to buy. They're actually out of stock at the moment online. But eBay is your friend. I would say I've only played 1 high point level game with Goblin Town, and I got shafted. It was against Dewey, so. And his Harad,
which is I was
about
to say it's absolute trash.
But it really showed. I had like 4 ranks deep, and I was just getting ground down. But anyway, competitive viability is high, I would say. People tend to think you're scum if you brought Goblin Town. I just have a lot of fun playing Goblin Town.
We endorse that opinion.
Yes, so when my opponent immediately thinks I'm scum, that must mean I brought a good army. So competitive, yay.
Someone at the tournament that we just went to literally cheered when he found out he wasn't going to have to play Meeeeer.
Yeah.
I just want that on record.
Was that because of the army?
Partially.
Okay.
I can't remember what army that guy was playing.
Azog. So it wasn't exactly.
Was it Azog? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
People just love to hate the goblins. I think that must be... everyone loves a scapegoat.
Kettle calling Black Pot, I think, but
Yes.
Right. So the army bonus. You can take more warriors in your warbands.
Yeah.
Which seems to be pretty synergistic with what you're trying to do with the army.
Horde out. I think if you were really going max horde, then... And obviously if you're not allying... It's great. Some people don't like it because when you get to medium to higher points, they prefer to have lots of captains so they can have a bit more might. They seem to think that it's worth the trade-off. I think that's because when you get to high points, like I was saying, your numbers just don't matter as much, and so you'd probably rather have the might at the front. But there's still might on goblin captains who are shit. So it helps at medium points to make sure that you've got the numbers you need, I would say, and at low points as well.
And also, like, you're not, I guess if you are allying in, you're not super upset about losing the army bonus because it doesn't have a detrimental effect on the ability to fight. It just means you have to build the list slightly differently.
That is 100% correct.
Cool.
Which brings us on to the alliances.
You have no historical alliances, which makes sense.
Sad face.
Yeah.
Apart from that, it's just... Is it every single evil army from The Hobbit? So you get Azog's Legion, Denizens of Mirkwood, Powers of Gold, the Dol Guldur, Smaug?
Do you not remember
Desolation of the North or whatever?
Wow.
Do you not remember the scene where Smaug is in the tunnels? Fucking doing drugs.
And then Moria.
Just him and Gollum in the depths of Goblin Town. Oh no!
So, I think you've got a couple of options here. You can ally a troll or 2. Not my favourite option, and one that I'm not really sure why people take, because it takes away from the main point of the army, which is to hoard out. You've already got your monster in the Goblin King, and he's far better than either of the trolls. So I don't know why people to put the trolls in, to be honest. But there we are. The other option is Denizens of Mirkwood, which is something I've tried and is quite nice at medium to slightly higher points level. You can take less goblins, which at medium to high points isn't necessarily an issue, and instead take a Spider Queen with a Bat Swarm. And that's really, really nasty. And sorts out some of the weaknesses in that you don't have very much mobility. Suddenly you've got maybe even one of the most mobile things in the game, where you can move the Spider Queen her full range and then poop out some Spiderlings, and then they move another 10 inches, and the infantry, so they can pick up objectives and things like that. And they can also scale over anything. So it sorts out the mobility issue. Suddenly Seize the Prize is a really good scenario for you. And the only thing it does is, I'd say you're probably not seeing her unless you're at 600 or 600 to 800 points, I would say. Because anything below that, you really need the numbers, in my opinion. And taking her means your break point is much, much lower.
There's the Goblin King. He's really good.
Yep. He's so good.
He's chubby.
I don't think he's OP. I think he's just very powerful. There we go.
I think in the context of the army, he's fine. I think in most other armies, he'd be a bit too much, maybe.
I don't know. I think he's powerful, but also definitely has his weaknesses. Like, he's so low courage.
That's a big issue.
And obviously, he's got his blubbery mass and his stuff like that, but he does only have one fate. And yeah, it's interesting, but I think he's definitely a powerful hero.
Yeah, he can go up to strength 6 with a 2-0 weapon. Yeah. He's fight 6, so he synergizes really nicely with Golem, who you pretty much always taking at medium points. He's got all the things you want. He's got, by which I mean strike.
Yeah. He's got
challenge. Throw that challenge in there to the other legendary heroes for no reason.
Monstrous actions.
Monstrous actions are very useful.
Same fight as Aragorn. Things you love to see.
Which is probably fair because he's like twice as tall. But Goblin King can charge over his own guys, which is useful because you can put him behind your front rank. Your opponent can only charge into your front rank, and then your Goblin King can just go wherever he wants.
He can chuck your own guys around. I have on many occasions dismounted enemy heroes by throwing goblins at them and just hitting on a 6. They don't expect it, and it's just comes out of nowhere. Sometimes I have mited it to a 6, where I've not needed in the way, because like dismounting Aragorn or something is just definitely worth it. And Blubbery Mass, so 3-up, wound is ignored, and magic powers and Elven Blades ignore it. He's also resistant to magic and causes terror. And because he's fight 6, it's going to be really hard to win fights against him. If he's got Golem in tow as
consistently, Grinner quite nicely, so you can get him out of trouble. Yeah, Golem makes it impossible for you to beat him in combat if he gets the 6. Grinner swap with me has come in useful.
Love that can be used on the Goblin King, despite the fact they have different size bases. I'm sure that's never ever going to be problematic.
It does make it a bit wacky, but then you would never use it otherwise. You wouldn't use it on anyone else because Grinner's the most valuable model otherwise, and you can't use it on the Scribe. So, I think it's fine as a rule, as long as you don't surprise your opponent with it and they can try and plan for it. So Goblin King. We've talked a bit about Grinner. He's got a whip, which is pointless, never does anything.
He's got strike,
which is really important.
Does he have March? I don't think he does he?
No, he doesn't. It's only the captains that have March, but that's fine because they're cheap. So he's got 3 mites. He's only 40 points. He's got strike, and he's got swap with me. So he's an auto include pretty much. He's really good. He's your only other access to strike, which is important. So you want to keep him with the Goblin King because also swap with me.
Do you ever pair him up with Golem, Grinner and Golem, or is he always tagging along with the Goblin King?
Grinner's only fight 3, so.
But if you're, meaning you can strike. If you struck with him and Golem was in the same combat, then you're nearly always winning that.
Let's see. Well, usually what I would do is, if I can, I would put Grinner, Golem, and the Goblin King in on a combat. Grinner's combating.
Yeah.
And the Goblin King might be striking if I need to. but that's obviously I wouldn't have to if Golem's in there as well. And then they just kill whatever they're touching, and then they go into something else together. And it's just they're just devastating together.
Yeah.
Then we got the Scribe. What are your opinions on the Scribe, guys? 50 points.
I think he's probably a little bit too good in low points. And then I think he evens out to be fine overall. And I think the fact that the stuff that he brings on, the extra models, counting towards your break limit, probably does make it balanced overall, if slightly annoying. There are definitely a couple of scenarios where it's like, yeah, this kind of breaks the scenario, but overall, fine, but annoying.
It's okay because it's not super consistent, is my conclusion. Like, it's just because his courage is so low, it, like, relatively speaking, it does mean that it doesn't go off all the time, and that makes it feel a bit better. If it was just like something that happened every turn, I think it would feel worse. So I think it's okay.
I think with Courage 3, you're passing just over half the time because you need a 7 on 2 die, right?
Yeah, but then because his what's it called? The number of goblins he brings on depends on how much he passes the courage test, doesn't it, or something?
Yeah. So for everyone you pass by, it's that plus D3.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but I always get incredibly lucky with the Goblin Scribe.
Yes, you do.
It's the microwave dice.
Yeah. So he does have a will as well, so you can usually get an extra couple. What I would say is that he needs to bring in 12.5 goblins to make his points back. Not only that, but usually you're leaving 1 or 2 goblins with him, so it's more like 13 or 14 goblins. On average, he tends to bring in about that number.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it goes over if the game goes a bit longer than expected. Sometimes it's under if it's a bit of a quicker game. And in those games, the goblins coming on from the edge of the board might not even make it in. I've had some games where I spawn goblins, I get unlucky for the first couple turns, and then the goblins start coming in, and they just don't make it to combat because there's just not enough time, or the game ends too quickly. And I would say that's why he's balanced, but mainly because, again, in the context of the army he's in, goblins don't have great mobility. And other than the mercenaries, which we'll come on to, he's your only way of moving around the board, essentially. I would say in things like heirlooms, he's incredibly good. I mean, anything that involves coming on.
Is it a completely unique mechanic, this, like, bringing models on later in the game?
Yeah.
And, like, I think
so. That you don't have to pay for anyway.
Yeah. I don't think it's like OP, but I think it does have an effect on your opponent, having been that opponent a few times. Like, it just makes it feel like you're on the clock and you want to get to the Scribe as quickly as you can. And that's it's not like stressful, I wouldn't go that far, but it is just like there is a very real threat you have to deal with, and the longer you leave him, the worse it gets. So you do try and hunt him down, essentially.
You know, I think in all of the games I've played with Goblin Town, which includes basically all of this year, I don't know how many games it would be, but it's probably 30 or more. The Scribe has only ever died once. I don't know, maybe there are just too many goblins between him and my opponent to chew through.
Yes.
Or I just protect him enough, but actually getting to the Scribe just seems impossible for the most part.
I mean, if they're getting to the Scribe, you're probably losing the game anyway, is presumably the problem. Like, it's a sort of, you know, a win more model, as it were. If you're ahead, it keeps getting better, and if you're behind, I mean, he does nothing if he's attacked, I guess, so that does make him vulnerable. I think the way you shoot him is kind of shit, because you have to be able to see the model itself, not any part of it, which I guess if you had to see any part of it...
That's actually changed. I've seen an FAQ, and basically, I think it's if you see the center column or him.
Right.
I think it's something like that, or it might even be any part of it now.
Okay, that makes it better.
Yes, essentially, you could try and shoot him.
Yeah.
You know, Legolas could have a pretty good go at him.
Mm-hmm.
He's only defense 2, so you're wounding him on 4s.
Yeah.
Even with normal bows, you're winning him on 4s, and he's only got 1 fate. So if you've just got a load of archery and you can manage to get a shot off, people tend to want to just shoot into the hordes of goblins that are charging at the moment and not think too much about the long term. So yeah, it's a mixed bag.
I guess if they had like horse archery or something, they could like shoot around the outside and try and get to him. But anything else, I think it's quite difficult to hunt him down.
Yeah. So that brings us to Golem. Lowest on the ring table.
Yep.
However, still an auto includes for 35 points, very, very cheap. And you get the ring, half the opponent's fight value. The king is fight value 6. Even if you struck up to 10, it's then half to 5. So the king will pretty much always be there. And he's also quite sneaky, putting the ring on, going round to trap heroes or get past things is quite useful as well.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
He's nice for the points.
Then we've got Goblin Captains and Goblin Mercenary Captains. I mean, you need them for March. Goblins are only 5-inch movement, so having an extra march is useful. Having lots of moves is also useful to make sure you can wrap around your opponents. And of course, everyone has Triffing Hordes, which we've not talked about yet, but essentially every Goblin's got a spear, apart from the Goblin King and the Scribe.
But they can only support other models who have the rule.
Yes.
For your alliances.
Yes. Yeah, God. Goblin Captains are really good. They're cheap. Goblin Mercenary Captains are a bit more expensive, but they do then allow you to take a bunch of Goblin Mercenaries who are defense 4 instead of defense 3. And that means you can ambush in a piece of terrain, which is also very useful. It helps some of the mobility problems and means you can surprise your opponent wherever you need them. The other thing you can do with them is deploy them on your front line if your opponent has a bunch of strength 3 weapons, because then rather than shooting you and winning on 4s, they're shooting and winning you on 5s if they can't get past the front rank. Something else interesting is that the Goblin Scribe can bring on Goblin Warriors with 2-handed axes, because, why not? I think that's all the heroes. I'd like to hear your opinions on the warriors. What makes the warrior so good for Goblin Town? I've got my own opinions, but I want to hear what you guys.
They have inbuilt spears, and I don't think the list works if they don't have that rule.
Not.
They're cheap and they can take axes, and you can go into combat at strength 4 without worrying about your model dying. So effectively, you should always piercing strike if you have an axe on the model, because if your model dies, you've lost 4 points. If their model dies, they're normally losing 10 to 12. So yeah. It just doesn't matter. And it's actually very difficult. You'd have to have strength 5 to actually be wounding them in return on 3s. So a lot of the time you're going to be strength 3 or strength 4, which are both wounding the goblins on 4s. So yeah, you're just getting so much value from such a cheap model, essentially.
Yes. If you do pierce and strike, of course, you might go down to defense 2, at which point, or even defense 1. So because they're defense 3 base, there's a 2/3 probability you'll become defense 1, and then your opponent will need 3s, even if they're strength 3. That has mattered in a few cases, but I think the trade-off from going from strength 3 to 4 is just so good. I played Eastlings, as you know, this weekend twice, and winning them on 5s instead of 6s is incredibly powerful. I think the thing that I think makes them so good is that, like Onod said, they're incredibly cheap, but they're cheap in the right places, in my opinion. But the fight value is where it gets interesting for me. You only fight 2, which is, not great, but you're not overpaying for fight value to then be outclassed by things like Easterlings with the Black Dragons or Elves, for example, because you're not paying for Fight 4 and then just getting beaten anyway. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
And
I think dwarves right now for me are in a really rough place. Like Dale as well, because you pay this premium for fight value, and so many armies now. Like also this fucking plague of like fight 5 heroes and fight 6 heroes who just go through like tearing through your chaff. Like there's no point paying this premium for elite warriors if all these incredibly powerful heroes are just going to kill them anyway. So yeah, I can definitely see the advantage of having loads of cheaper, really low fight warriors to soak up that damage.
Yeah, and like 4 points is just so low. Is that lower? That's the same points value as a Hobbit, right?
Yeah,
That feels bad.
yeah. It's almost like hobbits aren't meta.
Yeah. Then of course we've got Goblin Mercenary Warriors, who are the same but one more defense, one more points. I'd say they're only worth it if you're ambushing. I wouldn't say, paying 25% more for one more defense is going to be worth it, but it's worth for ambushing.
Yeah.
So that's all the models. I believe with the Games Workshop website updates that the mercenary captains are on there and they're just in resin.
Yeah.
As they are.
Yep.
And
R.I.P. Forge World.
Yeah. May it never come back. Although they're still very expensive.
Yes.
The Warriors are currently out of stock on GW's website, but I'm sure there are thousands of them on eBay, so don't worry about that.
Or you can buy some from Mayor. He's got thousands.
Why are you saying like Forge World is gone? It's still there. It's just part of Games Workshop's store now.
No, but it's not special anymore. It doesn't make you feel like, you're what are they called? Expert, isn't it, or something now? The Expert Collection.
Expert kits, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, they're called.
Yeah. Is that only for experts? In-game pros and cons. Fun heroes. Jesus Christ.
They're fun.
Okay.
Tell me what's not fun about them if you're playing them.
Well, I think the fucking Goblin King combo isn't fun to play against. I think it's fucking oppressive.
It's fun to play with.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Model count. Might count? Yeah, I guess with cheap captains and stuff like that, you'll have very high might. Mobility, sort of. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because your actual army isn't mobile, but the way it can bring models onto the board is. So you do end up with sort of pseudo mobility. In the current set of scenarios that exist in MESBG, these guys are very good because you just have a lot of models, and sometimes you can, be broken, and you're still winning because you've got more models left on the board than your opponent. And sometimes the scribe brings on more goblins than you had in your army at the start anyway, which feels good. Which feels good. And you can put axes on everybody, which currently axes seem to be very much in fashion for that very cheap strength 4 on the piercing strike. And we've already talked about the low fight and defense. The cons. If you're keeping track of anything that involves killing models, so I think that's Contest of Champions and Lords of Battle ?
I think so.
They're not completely unwinnable because you could just try and table your opponent, but they are very, very challenging for you to win. You don't have much versatility, so you've got lots of sort of single types of models. You only have 2 troop options and no friends. Is that referring to alliances or the people who play the list?
Both.
Okay, nice.
Probably both.
And your elite troops are 5 or 6 points? That's the most expensive troop type.
5 points.
5 points. That's the most expensive troop type you can take, which some would say is still quite cheap. So yeah, you'll be able to hoard out even if you're taking a few of those more expensive models.
I actually do think we should take a moment just for. I think the majority of people watching this are probably going to be interested in Mayor's thoughts on how do you beat Goblin Town. As a Goblin Town player, how do you feel like a player can go about beating this list? Because I think most people look at Goblin Town, and if they don't necessarily know what they're doing, it's intimidating.
Are there any lists? I'm going to add to this to Onod's question. Are there any lists that when you see them across the table, you're like, oh, this could be tough?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So thanks for asking that. I think there are definitely. I think it's. I'll start by answering the army question because that might give an insight into how to beat Goblin Town. The armies that I don't enjoy seeing across the table from my goblins are firstly Harad. The impact hits from camels from Farmerhood or whatever. Is it Farmerhood? Yeah. They are devastating. The poison arrows, lots of models that are just about better than goblins in that they've got strength 3, so they're killing me on 4s. They've got fight 3, so they're just about better than me. So they're not like elves where they're paying a premium and I can have 3 to or 4 to 1. It's closer to 1 to 1.5 against Harad for the most part because they are cheap enough to be just better than my goblins. The range firepower is really good. Even blowpipes, they can spam blowpipes, Farmerhood. A lot of the range threats are really good, and they can decimate me before I even get there. At which point, I'm fighting them like on a 1-to-1 ratio. So I'd say armies that aren't paying a premium to be like 5 times as good as at fighting a goblin, or 5 times the price of a goblin. If they're just enough better than a goblin and they've still got a lot of numbers, then that tends to do quite well. The other thing is I have not done too well against Easterlings. I'd say it's probably 50-50 the amount of times I've played them, which just sounds balanced, but I think they're really tough to grind through. And the phalanx, essentially they're rolling 4 dice because of the banner. And with 4 dice, the odds of getting a 6 are pretty high. I'm only rolling 2 dice. So the odds of me actually getting a win on a fight is extremely low, and then I'm dying on a 4 or a 3 if I've pierced, which against Eastlings I am because they're defense 6. Also positioning is really, really important. Not allowing your army to be enveloped by the goblins. Like you were saying earlier, you might feel under some kind of time pressure to attack the goblins, but they've got no range threat, which is usually nice for my opponent because they're not having to think about pressure from range fire. Obviously, they're thinking about pressure from more goblins coming in, which is a different kind of pressure to get going. Even if I amass, twice as many goblins as I started with, assuming that you have positioned correctly and you're holding some kind of gap or making sure that I can't get a full surround too quickly, I think you stand a very good chance because you'll be fighting the goblins more or less on a 1-to-1 ratio as opposed to them surrounding you. And as soon as you break them, they're in big trouble. A lot of the times I've lost games from just running away too quickly, getting unlucky with my courage tests. The Goblin King's obviously a hero of legend, so you'll need to plan for at least 1 free turn, or just trying to get a move off and tagging the Goblin King and all the heroes and just run away. I would say that's the main way of doing it. But of course, then if you've given up board position to be able to kill goblins, you're going to be rushing to try and get objectives. So there is a kind of balance to be struck there. I would say it is really just tough to deal with so many models. I know that you found that as well playing against Goblin Town. You definitely feel like you're on the back foot, I think, playing against goblins.
Yeah. I mean, sort of going back to what you were saying, like, I'm thinking, like, let's say I took my Grey Company 600 point list against you. So I've got 8 models. Like, how does that list deal with it, or is it just a case of that list is just inherently flawed against a list like Goblin Town? I mean, I know I've got big heroes, so I'm going to be chopping through a lot of goblins, but there's only so many turns you can go before eventually they roll poorly.
Firstly, there's a 1 in 6 chance that you'll be playing me on a scenario where you need to get kills. which is good. I know, and I know that's not. There's also 5 out of 6 chance that you're not doing that, and it's subjective based.
Let's say we were doing what we normally do, which is vetoes. One.
Yeah, you're fucked.
Yeah.
Because I just
there we go, guys. Let's finish the video there.
Yeah, the low model count. Basically, you have to cheese it, and you have to sit on top of a building or something, and basically every turn just shoot me down.
Good fun.
Or hold like a forest. It's really hard because wherever you go, you're just going to get enveloped by goblins. Having said that, the Isengard game we played where I outnumbered you quite heavily, not as much as if I had goblins, but it was a vanilla list, so I still had plenty of models. You just chew through all of those.
But I think that's different,
really
isn't it? Because that's a manageable level of models, and at that point, like, heroic combats are worth it. If you're like chaining into multiple Uruks a turn, whereas like big work,
there's no point wasting your might on the little heroes here into just another goblin.
Yeah,
I think if you've got
Aragorn, sure, he's going to combat every turn. He's just going to chop through them, but he's got the free might point. But if you're sitting there looking at the Goblin King, you're like, I need to save some of this might. Because otherwise you're just going to chew up all my might by throwing shit at me and then stomp me with Gollum and the Goblin King.
And also that one turn you roll badly, you're going to be trapped, and you're going to be getting hit by guys who are strength 4, so they're wounding you on 5s. And you probably actually this happened at the weekend where like I had one turn to kill Aragorn, I just threw everything at him, got lucky on the strike, and then he just died. And like that does just happen, as we've seen, if you you get even slightly unlucky.
Anyway, we went slightly off topic there for the normal army, but I feel like people will appreciate that.
It's real easy to collect. Well, apart from the fact they're all sold out at the moment, that's a slight barrier. But there is a starter set. Is there still a starter set, or is that now
the old?
I don't know if it's still being sold, but I imagine you can get it.
I think that there will be lots of sprues hanging from it.
Yeah.
They're easy to paint. Like, you can do them all one color. Some like you can definitely do extra stuff if you want to with, like, I don't know, that cool basing that we saw at that tournament we went to or whatever. Like, that's definitely a thing. But yeah, you can just churn them out pretty quickly if you want to. I don't think you've got a very broad variety of alliances in this one, to be fair. Like, I think it's not the army with the most limited alliances, but there's probably only, 1 or 2 you'd realistically ally with?
Yeah, I think if you're playing competitively, you might not even ally at all.
Okay. Yeah, and then you're going to be doing a lot of the same model over and over again, and they're going to look very similar. And yeah, that's kind of the cons in a nutshell. But if you don't mind doing that, it's not really too much of a downside.
Right, Matt,
each to their own.
Through some lists at various points.
So all of these lists are lists I've taken to a tournament. I've only lost with one of these lists. So first, the 340 list. This is technically a 350 list, but I took out 2 goblins because then it only requires 1 box of goblins. So this is just the Goblin King and retinue and 1 box of goblins. It's a 12, Grinner with 12, and the Scribe with 6. That's it. That's 30 goblins, and it's 3 heroes. Actually, if you actually want to use the Goblin Scribe,
I was going to say,
you're probably going to have to buy some extra goblins. So actually, that's 2 boxes of goblins, and you might as well throw that list. 2 two-handers into the Goblin King's warband, I would suggest. So yes. Then we come on to the 600-point lists. This is the list that I won the GBHL 90 with. Went 5 wins and a draw. Then we've got an 800-point list. This is essentially the combined of a doubles list that myself and Sebastian took to a tournament. I think we essentially won all of our game. No, we lost 1 game. And then we were fighting for first place in the final game and lost that. So I think we came sort of like 5th or something in the tournament. But so this is an 800 point list. You need the Goblin King retinue, 2 boxes of mercs, and 3 boxes of Goblin Warriors. So you got so Scribe with 12, Merc with 10, Merc with 9, Goblin Captain with 18. Then we've got the King with 16, Grinner with 12, Gollum in the King's Warband, and then another Captain with 12. So you've got plenty of march, you've got plenty of mobility, lots of mercs deploying behind enemy lines, and enough goblins up front to essentially outnumber anyone on the front rank, regardless of the mercenaries. The mercenaries coming on behind is terrifying when there's 2 warbands of them, because you can get the surround just that much quicker. You can put them on objectives. Meanwhile, the scribe is bringing in even more goblins. So you have 97 models there at 800.
Would you have changed the 800 point list in hindsight, or would you have kept it the same?
No, I'd keep it the same, because the last game we lost was incredibly unlucky. We did quite well, and it was quite fun just bringing on more and more goblins and deploying the mercenaries behind our opponent. It just felt very goblin-y. I don't know. You feel like a bit of a goblin when you play these guys.
You feel like a goblin. There you go. There's a glowing recommendation.
What a sales pitch.
Just feels like you're like evil, you know?
Yep.
If you play
No,
Goblin Town,
I think people would agree with that.
That's irrespective of the goblins, though. That's just you as a person.
maybe that's why I was drawn to the goblins.
Maybe. Makes sense.
Oh.
Anyway, should we do an outro?
Thank you for
Fuck's sake.
Thank you for joining us here on the Hobby Breakfast Show. Hope you enjoyed. If you've got any other questions or goblin experiences you'd like to share to the group, please feel free to comment below. And I've been the Mayor. We've been joined by OT.
Bye.
And Onod.
I've had a lovely time.